All right, hello again. This is another episode of Daily Painting, another day, another concept. We're still working on the yellow color from the collection of Unseen Forces, where we try to portray the energy that moves through all living and non-living beings. My approach today is a little bit to explore the colors of greenish, darker color with a lighter on top and vice versa. I want to a little bit minimize what I can do with the painting in terms of different tonality to understand better those two-tone interplay between each other. That might be helpful in the later paintings that I do because it will help me to solidify the contrast in a much more controlled way and also understand how the vivid highlights really punch the life into the painting. So I have two paintings here, and what I will try to do is basically do two different backgrounds. So one darker, very beautiful tone from the beginning, sandy yellow, almost a mustard or burnt sienna, and I will see how it works. Lately I was a little bit obsessed with recording on the go because I like the idea actually of taking my paintings outside and trying something out and outdoors. And for that, my two cameras that I have, and I'm recording right now, they're really good quality. But the issue with those is like they're not waterproof. And the weather is constantly changing recently, you know? And the one thing that you don't want to worry about while you're painting is the weather resistance. And if I, can focus on the paint or on the recording, it's still a challenge that I try to solve. So I started looking into the different setups, I even thought like, oh, I just put a plastic band on my camera, right? But that's also difficult as it can really, go in front of the lens. And then if the lens is really protected from the elements, what if there will be a super rain from a small one? Doesn't mean that I need to hide everything and so on and so on. But what is the plus of those lenses is the fact that I have beautiful depth of field. I have really nice quality to this footage. And that's really awesome. But it's still a challenge for me. So I started to going on this rabbit hole, okay, how to solve that problem further. And I look at the action cams, and the action cams are really awesome. But the problem with them is the fact that they have really wide angles. So yes, this angle is right, but is it enough when it comes to the actually crop on the painting so I can see everything? And I think it's this needs to be a lighter tone. So we're getting white. It's for me a challenge because I want to see a detail like what I'm recording right now while I'm painting, and the only solution I have for that is to put an action cam really close to the front in order to minimize the distance. But the problem is that I don't know how we're going to abstract my view. So I came to the different conclusion that in order to have weather settings, I will need also maybe another phone. So I will record a wide angle on the one side and another lens with with an iPhone or something else on this camera. In this way, I'll be protected. Yes, the image quality will fall, but it's not so. I'm thinking that this yellow here that I propose here is also very desaturated. And as much as I like it, I think it lacks a certain punch to it. Very, very difficult indeed. Yeah, really hard to get like this vivid yellow tone on the painting. But whatever. Maybe just alright, it's just the lighting that I cannot see properly what's happening, but yeah. Yeah, so I went on the iPhone route, and yesterday I purchased something and it wasn't like an obvious because I wanted a deal, right? So I went online. I went to the eBay Kleinanzeigen in Germany. This is like a local way to shop, and I found a deal. But I'm very usually electric when it comes to electrics and buying things online, very careful, and I know what I'm doing because the tech is my kind of previous life world. And what was funny enough, I was asked maybe for doing a PayPal for some reasons that sound to me quite good. And I used PayPal with the buyer protection, right? Even the person on the side say, "Hey, do a buyer protection." Long story, long story short, I made that PayPal transaction, and I get a notification from eBay that the person that I was talking to might be potentially a fraud account. And just when I click, pay, I receive this notification and I say, oh no. And I'm really strapped for cash right now since, oh my God, it's been 2 years since I'm like full-time unemployed. Don't ask me what I did for that 2 years. I'll tell you another time. But I've been busy in a good way, in kind of existential way. So, so yeah, I'm like, shit, I have no cash, plus I spend something with the potential scam on it, and I open a ticket immediately to revert that action. But I just cannot help myself to think like, oh my God, I made a massive mistake, and I'm like an experienced person in this field. Like, how could I do that? Oh my God. Well, it is what it is. You cannot have everything. You cannot have a good deal sometimes and trying to go outside the box, and then you get burnt a little bit, which it's funny enough, the more I paint, also, sorry, let it pass. More I paint, the more I understand about trying out things. And I tried in this area, and I obviously did get burnt. Yeah, not the best way to start the morning, but it will not stop me from painting. Oh, I love it. Okay, so my thoughts are that we could wait until those two paintings gonna dry out in terms of the backgrounds and touch it up, or we can work with kind of a water technique, which we washing out with the towel to find the lighter spots in the painting. And I do have to say that I like that technique, but I kind of tried that before already. So I wanted to try something different, which is like, okay, let's get those two tones on those two paintings without the towel, without moving the color out. But that if I add this light to the dark, it's gonna get mix the colors on the canvas, which is a meh. It's kind of like why I did go to the acrylic in order to not have that problem that I have in oil painting. But it seems that it seems like we should wait and then start painting again in order to find those contrasts better. But I'm also like thinking right now, look at those, that maybe these backgrounds, even this is underpainting, maybe I should be a slightly bolder in terms of finding still a mixed tonality. So what I could do is use the towel in order to find the light and dark points, and once the paint dries, I ignore it and paint in different places so it doesn't seem like, I'm highlighting purposefully those places that I washed out. And I think that could be okay. Or I just now take a paint and make slightly darker spots so this is not so flat, rather than washing out with the towel. So many experiments to make. I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna wash out of the paper. It's another set of the same exercise. So I'm just gonna darker slightly the tone. I have a black paint. Let me see, because I don't want to really change the hue of the color. Yes, I do have a black paint. So let's do that. Let's take another tray. I'm coming back. Another tray. Let's take another tray and darker this tone. This one. And take another brush to remove slightly this color from I will show you what I'm doing, because it might be interesting too. So I take this darker color and I shall try to add the dark to it. I mean, take the brush and add it to the dark spot. created more paint this time. Mixed in more paint so I have more flexibility exactly for those purposes. And look at that, I just add on the nibble and how dark it is, and this is not what I wanted. I don't want this painting to be black. So it dramatically changes the hue. So I need to be careful, so I'm doing it again. A little bit of that paint, and I'm actually gonna touch this slightly black from the tray and just touch it here. And look at that, that's already a massive difference, slightly more. Yeah, let's see. Yeah. So I'm gonna add those slightly darker spots. The painting to give this background slightly more depth. So the background is not so flat. I want to give it slightly more water so I can hide the brush stroke slightly more. With this brush work slightly down. At the end of the day, this one has a really small square frame, and the more I paint with those, you know, like I get some feedback from people around, like my close people, my close circle, that, you know, maybe this background is not this frame is such a shame that I did it, because when I paint overall it gives us such a bigger impression of the painting, and I'm not sure that this is the only way to look at it. It's one of those cases when you actually have to have a finished frame in order to imagine how it would look like in that square. But what I'm trying to think about, like how I can make undertone sketches actually with the pencil itself and just cover it with the paint and leave it as such, because I think there's this inherent value to it that makes this primal kind of sense of like how the simplification of the tools. And that might be a very interesting way to explore the painting. Yeah, I think this background is better right now, slightly differently painted. And I'm gonna do exactly the same exercise with this painting, which is so this one's almost like papyrus, you know, like Egyptian paper created for pressed and watering down wood into many different layers. Into different many layers. Sorry for that. Just my nose is slightly dry, going wet. Yeah. So I'm gonna take, where's that brush? So I'm gonna let it sit here, and let's color code it. This brush goes here. Here I'm gonna take this paint, which was my other background, and obviously I don't have easy surface to. This is never ending quest with those plastic thingies, trays. You always need more. Which is not the best. I mean, you can reuse them, but it's not best for environment. I'm being conscious about that. And I'm gonna find substitute for it. Right now I'm not entirely sure what will that be, but I'm gonna find it. I'm not gonna give up. Now I take this tiny dark and put in here. Look at that. Oh, that changes the whole gamma, which is darkness of the paint. Super cool. Super cool, quite bold. And it's a bit too dark. So I'm gonna add that previous paint on it, slightly more, my white tones. Start. I have a problem. I have a brown paint from mixing on this brush. You see? I think it's because I used this one for this painting. So I selected the wrong brush. And it changed the hue of my yellow, and it's not welcome change. I don't want that. I want to stay in the same kind of world. There you go, better. Yep. So yeah, there's a way to approach this vivid backgrounds, and you can leave them flat. But I'm a painter, and I believe in the quality of the painting and the brushwork made by hand. And that gives me a solid impression that I'm actually working with painting rather than making a graphical representation of possible painting. It's a style of kind of posterization, making it look like a poster more. And yeah, I'm not into this kind of change, at least not for these paintings. So I'm playing just with some kind of adjusting of this background to create slightly more depth. I love that. It's like you're looking at the sun and there's sometimes small pieces of the clouds, and you know, you don't look up when the sky is totally blue. You just accept it, acknowledge its existence, and you know, it's beautiful. But you move on, you don't stare much. But if there is a slight amount of clouds, you starting looking how they move, they change the colors all around us, how they cast shadows on the things, even in the slightest way. It makes your skin sometimes less warm and more warm. And this is how it's like you can think about painting the same way, like with adding those slight hues. I hope they are visible. And if not, they're not, whatever. Um, my undercoat is already dryish, so I can sense how the brush moves in a very how may I say that, rough way, you know, getting the contact with the canvas and slowing down. That gives a slightly different texture to the painting with the dry brush work. Okay, we have something here. And now what I will try to do is I'm looking at my references now to really understand like how I want to technically what I want to do is now introduce these higher tones to that painting and those darker tones to this painting. But I'm thinking about the mark that I want to accomplish, what kind of colors I would like to dwell in. And not colors, but the movement. Is it bold or is it linear work? And I'm contemplating. It can take some time. I don't want to skip those videos when I do that, when I think. I think there's some beautiful quality to silence and slowing down. Okay, the way how I'm gonna approach it this time, I'm gonna create still pockets of energy, like non-linear work, but much more bolder amounts of energy in order just to understand this style and contrast. And later on in my next paintings, I'm gonna do work with a much more smaller brush to give it more linear texture to it. And then I can, you know, progress and judge better without that distraction of stylistic, linear impact. Holy moly, so many words. That's good. It helps me to understand what I'm doing and what's in my head. It's never like silence is I'm all processing exactly the same things in my head, maybe without the barrier of language, so I don't have to touch on those parts of my brain. But this process is still happening. Nothing is fast, like nothing is really truly effortless. It's just like how you train and your muscle create this muscle memory that's a little bit slightly more automated. So the currents can go in your brain much more faster. But since I had a much more longer break in painting, you know, my muscles here are not well developed. Or it's forgotten. I need to get back into my shape. And this is exactly what this exercise is about, getting back into the shape so I can do things more effortlessly and progress even to more outrageous kind of ideas on the painting without feel stale. You know, sometimes when you paint and you start feeling stale because exactly you don't have this muscle memory and there's too many issues that you want to solve at once. And that creates a very challenging scenario for you as an artist to have, self-perception of how good you actually are. You are good. Actually, all of us are really good. And we all have like that potential in us to have the self-esteem really up. We just need to like train, and that's it. We are training. Let's do those pockets on the dry paint. I'm working now with a lighter tone and I'm pushing it into the darker tone. And let's do it. It's just there's no other way than very good. Then just give it life. The funny thing with the abstraction is that um, you turn off your brain that tries to recognize the form and you give more freedom to your muscles to play with it. And it's almost like you turn off the part of your brain and you surface your heart out and your instincts. It's just because every stroke starting to work much more on the level of the feeling, you know? Like yes, and you know what's happening the later on? People, mind, brain cannot help itself to start looking for patterns to recognize the certain symbols, so it makes sense for the brain. Because the brain really works as a instrument to identify your environment, to know what to do next or where to move. It's not made to be still, but when we want to make still, the first causes action is what? We don't move. And if we don't want to move further, we close our eyes. And when we close our eyes, we don't see recognize patterns anymore. But if you see even those patterns, then your brain starts creating those different stories for for you to understand what it is. So even though I'm letting go and let myself play with it, I will never be probably fully free. I will need to blindfold myself and paint, which I will do, but not now, not in this session. Viewer will look at this painting and will not necessarily see abstraction in it. He will see either a memory of something, that something reminds this thing of him. For him, it reminds something. And that's actually totally fine. I'm here for that. See, what I'm doing is actually treating this painting as a form of exercise in order to also see how different volumes, which is thickness of the paint, how it represents itself on the painting. As I don't want to make this anything really serious, really conceptual, just want to play with those values, you know, just like how does it feel? It's a painting of freedom, of artistic, stylistic possibilities. You know, I also like the idea of watering down. Maybe I will put some water here just to see how more transparent levels of that high tones. What does it mean for me? As a tool in my assortment. I'm not adding those darker stones here because that's not the point of this exercise, although it might be that this transparency already is making things darker, and just by adding that tone we'll have slightly different quality. Let's do it. It's a test and I'm gonna learn everything on this one, rather minimize my things to fulfill the right composition. So I'm doing now darker color, taking out paint, putting it in, taking a little bit of black, making it darker. And now I have a thick paint, darker in tone, still from color spectrum of that yellow, but it is thicker paint. And if you look carefully, we can find a distinction between, let's say this will be a good one to try. Okay, so this one is transparent version of this one, and this one is a darker tone of this one but without transparency. And you can see how much different levels of the depth I am creating in the painting, and overall how that changes the play work, how that creates a diverse impression of the paint. It almost looks like now if you have a light shining, you know, inside of flowing in the snow, you know, like the snow is rain, snow is not raining, falling snow. And if you flash with the camera and the snow, you have everything in foreground lighter. The second layer is darker because less light, and what is far back is becoming almost transparent in the form of the mist because the light is not touching it from the flash, but it's merging with the background. So that's kind of like the sensation that I have. And it's a really good lesson for me, even for later subjects. So I'm gonna approach now this painting with the same approach to learn. So let me just take those paints on the side here, this on the side. It's really important to have a large space around you to put things down and up. I will clean the brush in the water to make sure that I'm not changing the colors. Shit, I'm getting hungry. Always hunger is there for you to stop you from painting or to remind you to eat to paint better. Matter of perception, sir. Okay, so how we did that? Again, I'm trying different marks. Now I will change to transparent level of brushing. So less paint. More water. Different marks, movements. Working with transparency and slightly with the stronger intensity. Finishing with air sharp endings. Let me move so actually I don't cover it with my head. Yeah. Okay. Change the brush and to a smaller one. Clean it. Do slightly different brush work on it. Let the mind, let the intuition guide you. Fill in the spots that requires your care. dance with freedom. Yeah. And now the last step is changing tonality, which what we did before is we putting the penny we want to play with, and we did giving a slight touch of a dark. And let's see what happens. Thicker layers of this tone, but with added black. How does it feel when I cover a transparent figure? With a thicker, darker tone of that same color. Does it matter? Does it changes our contrast to this level that we want to stop using that color? Or is it adding enough depth that we want to pursue it further? Okay, transparency with the same color. Transparency. Remember that this is very monochromatic color palette, so every touch of your brush is changing quite a lot, because those subtle changes, the same tonality, are much more, um, our eyes much more quickly see those differences. If I would, let's say, use the blue color, excuse me, the contrast between the color becomes so much apparent and different that automatically will ask our brain to ignore those subtle tonalities because this is not the message that we should focus on. Okay, this is it. I have to say, just by looking at it, I already came to certain conclusions between those two paintings. I think there's a place for the paint, and the painting technique and how you layer the colors also depends heavily on the primal background that we have. It changes like what will be maybe the best technique to approach a painting. So from as far as my painting goes, I would see like this darker painting would look better, and maybe with much more washed out with the paper towel and the backgrounds we have those dripping smudges more visible. And maybe the lighter tone that I use here is not more, could be more neonic, more saturated. But maybe not, maybe this is, let's say, treated as it is because the contrast is visible. But is this approach right, putting this lighter colors on the darker? I kind of feel like, yeah, with washed paper towels and putting those pockets in and changing slightly the tonality would be a way to go. Maybe that would be different if we go to the, let's say, subject of the human and stuff like that on the background, and then we create a silhouette with the thicker layers of the paint, and that would be okay. But yeah, that's what I think. Just quickly looking at it. And with this technique, I think this is really solid. I think this lighter background allows us to really play with the transparency of the colors and makes more texture visible. So here they're both thickness, both transparent, both changing the tones, the thicker and transparent also. It all gain way more character. Of course you could brush on the, coming back to this painting, brushed in those so it feels more like faded and stuff like that. But then I would argue that this background is start losing its sense, which is here because it's so light and the transparency coming out with no matter what you put at it, you get like more value out of this. So yeah, if you want to have more play with the texture and more visibility in terms of the variety of different brush strokes, I would go with the lighter background. If you want to build slightly more moody background with less texture but more visible contrast, go with a darker one. It might seem obvious to come to it and to this conclusion even before we paint it, but to really understand how the layers of my paint work on it makes dramatically different impression, form of a confidence in me when I'm gonna approach next concepts. That will be it for today, at least for the concepts. And yeah, I cannot wait to have another session tomorrow. Thank you.